What's up, guys? Ben Carey here, founder of Capwise, here to bring you another college football preview. And joining me, as he did last week, is Rob Vino of Rob Vino Sports. Rob, how you doing this morning?
I'm good this morning, Ben. We're closer and closer to real game time here, right? Thursday night football, a pretty extensive card for
Yeah,
this week because, as has been the case in the last few years, bookmakers now make all FCS versus FBS teams available on the extra board, and they even make the pure FCS games available to us, side and total, on the FCS board. So a lot of action. Good to start with one last night on UAB. Pretty once they got rolling, it was pretty easy. Quarter and a half, it wasn't so easy, right? I think it was
yeah.
nothing for a while.
It was a little ugly to start, but it got going. I want to talk about that real quick. So I'm 30 years old. I've only been in this about 10 years. FCS, or at the time was D1 AA, those weren't always available to bet on, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, it's only been universal. In other words, all offshores, all Las Vegas, wherever you can find a sports book. It's really only been universal for about the last 5 years. It
Hmm.
was sporadic a couple of years before that, but you really couldn't get. It would be hard to recommend one of those games in the business that we're in, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody, it wasn't available to everybody. But
Yeah.
now it's commonplace, and I saw yesterday, close to home where you are, Wyoming very quickly legislated legalized sports betting. So Wyoming's in on the deal now.
The joke there is the 100 sports bettors in Wyoming are thrilled. No, but you'd be surprised. I mean, like it's a smaller state, but hey, there's people out there who love their sports. Wyoming fans, they're very passionate, so I'm sure they have quite a few sports bettors out there in Laramie and then over there in Cheyenne. But yeah, it's funny because the smaller conferences and then of course the FCS level, you really have to do your research, but you can find some pretty good value if you know what to expect. And yeah, it's something that the average Joe better isn't going to run to bet, like a Northern Colorado game. But guys like us, if we can find value, where we're going to
Right.
give it out to our listeners.
No question.
Yep.
And the spring helped a lot of people, Ben, because the FCS played their season in the spring, and it was really the only game in town as far as football is concerned. So, those who had ignored it before, a few trickled over and started to watch. And, football's football, right? And point spreads are point spreads, and you can become acclimated to FCS quickly. I mean, listen, in college basketball, they're all D1. I think there's 350 of them.
Yep.
If you combined FBS and FCS, you get a pretty large number as well. But somehow, some way, people manage to follow all college basketball in your neck of the woods, Northern Colorado, in the Big Sky. That's a program that a lot of people bet on that conference.
Big Sky college basketball is very fun to bet on. It's been lucrative for me, and I
Yeah.
don't see that changing. So, to your point, absolutely, yeah. Big Sky, smaller conferences, great to bet on. So let's hop on into things. Quick recap with the 5 games from week 0, which, I mean, we had some underwhelming games. I think all the favorites covered but Nebraska, which I'm okay with. I'm not a Nebraska fan. My leans weren't too good, but I luckily didn't bet anything. I thought Nebraska was going to come out and win after 2 quarters. That was not the case. And I think you mentioned last time we had you on UCLA, you got very early in the summer around like -11 potentially. That was a breeze. And I think our preview on UCLA Hawaii was right on point. We talked about how UCLA was just going to be able to run all over them.
Yeah.
Questions with Hawaii's defense, and DTR really didn't even have a great game, but that offense was just too much for Hawaii.
Yes, certainly at the point of attack, the line of scrimmage, Ben, it was a mismatch, right? And it
Yeah.
was a mismatch from the get-go. I mean, UCLA kicked the field goal to open, and next thing we saw was Zach Charbonnet and Britton Brown just running free for a majority of that game. So I think on this show, we read back the quote from Britton Brown
Yeah.
who said, I think we have a really good game plan. I got the feeling we want to get out there and run on these boys. And it's what they did. And, it's why a lot of times you can't apply coach quotes that are always, everybody's positive, Ben. I guess that's the
It's the
point. And the
coach
word,
speak, like,
yeah,
for
you have to
example,
weed through it.
Royce Freeman got cut by the Broncos, and the first thing Vic Fangio says is like, someone's going to get really lucky to pick him up. It's like,
But you
what else
cut
are
him.
what else are we supposed to say?
Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
They
Sorry
all
to cut
do
you
it.
off. You're right on point there.
They all do it. Hawaii, a lot of people, believed in what they were saying, that the defense was improved, and we found out, at least against that level of competition, it's really not improved. What happens in the Mountain West, we'll see. They might be better suited for those type teams, but they certainly weren't suited for the UCLA offensive line in that ground game.
No, and they're gonna face some teams that are gonna run the ball. I mean, the majority of the Mountain West schools, Wyoming, of course, Air Force in the triple option, San Diego State. They're gonna face teams that are gonna run the ball. So they better figure that out quickly. But at least they'll have one game where hopefully they can learn from and get ready for conference play. So let's hop on into the first game we're going to cover. And speaking of a team that defense last year was not great, North Carolina, Virginia Tech's the first one that Rob and I are going to hop on into. And I specifically wanted to touch on this one because I find the line very interesting. I think this is a great game for us to discuss, not only what we're seeing with the line, but I think it's going to be a great matchup. I mean, Blacksburg, I don't think they had fans last year, and we know that's one of the top 10 home field advantages in college football. I'm showing the line at -5.5 for Virginia Tech, or sorry, -5.5 for North Carolina. Of course, the Hokies being the underdog, and then the total right around 64. So I'll let you start, Rob. What are you seeing in this one? And the lines are really interesting here because I think we're seeing a lot of money on the Tar Heels, but not a lot of line move.
Yeah, it's interesting, Ben. A lot of people in the circles where, or colleagues that I cross paths with and talk to every day that are bettors, the sentiment really seems to be toward Virginia Tech here and anti-UNC. In fact, I've gotten asked the question on different shows, whether they be radio segments across the country or shows that we do at Wager Talk. You get asked the question a lot, why is North Carolina ranked number 10 in the country? People can't figure that out. But, my immediate response is, if you ask me the Associated Press or the coach's top 25 at any point during the season, I really don't know it. It really doesn't apply to what we do. I don't know any of us that are, hunting down or waiting for Tuesday morning to see what the top 25 is.
I guess the only time, Rob, is if we try to understand why a team is ranked the way or favored the way they are, and then you're like, oh, they're now ranked in the top 25 or they're now number one. But other than that, we're not going and saying like, oh, they're number one. I think we should value them a little more.
Right.
We would never do that.
A lot of times you'll find the favorite is the team that's lower ranked against a top 25 opponent, right? So, but the bottom line to this is, I think where North Carolina has improved, that goes under the radar or unseen by most, is in the recruiting job that's been done by Mac Brown. They've recruited at a tremendous rate. In fact, it's not quite Clemson level yet. He's getting there. He's closed the gap from where he used to be when he took the job and where Clemson was. North Carolina lost a ton of offensive talent, right? The running backs, you and I are both Bronco fans when we don't have an interest in the game. And Javonte Williams, obviously one of those UNC studs last year. They lost a lot of pieces, but they didn't lose Sam Howell. And I think in reading a lot of stuff from coordinators and opposing coordinators, what's impressed people the most was the way they played the first half defensively against Texas A&M in their bowl game, a game where they had a bunch of opt-outs and really had no business even being in against Jimbo Fisher's team. And yet, North Carolina was right there up until the fourth quarter, late. I think defensive improvement is pretty large on the UNC side. I think the larger questions, Ben, for me are on the Virginia Tech side, which, as
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier, is the side that people tend to favor here. They want to take these points. Um, but, when they lost Bud Foster last year, 27-year vet, a defensive coordinator, maybe it was 28, things kind of went down the tubes last year. Now, you have to be fair to Virginia Tech because they had coronavirus hit them like no other team. So the
Yeah.
first few weeks, their secondary was ravaged, and a lot of young guys got tossed into the fire here at Virginia Tech. And we're going to see if the improvement is made. I'm not a fan of Braxton Burmeister at quarterback. So again, if he's improved, and if you take their final regular season game against Virginia last year, he looked really good, and Virginia's not a slouch in the ACC. So, but I think there's more questions offensively and defensively to be answered at Virginia Tech. I always like to say that emotion, which Lane Stadium will have plenty of. They'll play Enter Sandman. The place will go nuts. It's an ACC opener with fans back in the place. But emotion eventually succumbs to talent at some point in the game. And I still feel like UNC's the superior team talent-wise. They'll have to find a way, and I guess in keys to the game, they'll have to find a way to stop Virginia Tech from running the football, because if Virginia Tech can run and UNC hasn't solved the problem, then it could be a real close game. But I sort of lean UNC here. Sam Howell has enough weaponry, although the names aren't quite as highly known as they were last year. But he can put up a lot of yardage really quick. And like I say, the recruiting, if you just go in and check who they brought into this place through transfer portal and high school, it's at a pretty high rate right now. So I'll lean UNC in this game, but not something that I've gotten to the window with yet.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one for me because, I mean, regardless of the sport, Rob, we've seen these before where the sharps, and when I say quote unquote sharps, we're not saying 100% of the best college football bettors are on one side or the other. It's never that way. And I think that's a good point to make, because I think sometimes when we're like, oh, the sharps are on one side, we just assume that no other sharps on the other. That's just not how it works. I mean, it's difference of opinion of individuals who know a lot about a specific sport. But I will say in this one, it's almost like a snowball effect where, there was sharp action on Virginia Tech, and then it kind of said like, well, maybe I should be on Virginia Tech too. And it's almost like it clouds your thinking, right? And I'm personally speaking to myself because I do lean Virginia Tech in this one, but I need to have some self-awareness to say like, why is that? Is it because I'm hearing of other sharp bettors being on that side? Because at the end of the day, UNC, their defense was not good last year, right? But there's a lot more question marks, like you said, on the Virginia Tech side versus North Carolina. So, I mean, I think this number is kind of right where it should be. A commenter said it's 6.5 in some spots. I think I saw that on Bet Rivers. But at the end of the day, if Sam Howell plays like the market expects him to, this could be a 2-touchdown win for the Tar Heels. So, yeah, it's tough because we're looking at, again, like you said, Blacksburg and the home field advantage. But in theory, that should already be cooked into this line. So you're not fooling anyone by, and I'm not saying you, but I'm saying if you're betting Virginia Tech and you're saying, oh, well, they're at home, it's like, well, that's already accounted for. So for me, I do lean Virginia Tech. I think I'm personally going to be betting it. I like the angle, and I have enough faith in their quarterback. But again, it's a lot of speculation. If he comes out and doesn't look like I expected him to, I don't know how Virginia Tech's going to hang with North Carolina. I think this needs to be a lower scoring game for them to cover the spread. And for the total, do you have any leans there? Let me see what the numbers at. I'm showing.
I think I saw like
64.
Yeah. Generally speaking, Ben, if I'm looking at a UNC game, the first reaction is always to the over.
Absolutely.
And at that number, 64, just for your viewers on this show, 65 would be more of the key number, right? 34, 31, 35, 30. 65 comes up more often than 64 does. So if you like over, you probably still have that point worth of wiggle room
Hmm.
in playing it. I could never play it. Last year, I think this game was 56 to 45 or something crazy,
Yeah, it was
101 points.
I mean, they were trading touchdowns left and right and scoring quickly too.
Yeah, and I think, coaches are going to go back. Coaches always learn from what went wrong. All the film sessions are going to be, here's what we gave up explosive play wise, defensively. We're not going to do that this year. So you'd expect it to come down somewhat. But is it going to come down 37, 38 points worth? That's over 5 scores. So we'll see. I want to say really, really quick, you made a couple of good points, and I don't want to ramble here, but I want to say this, that you were talking about line moves and
Hmm.
how they convince bettors that line moves are the right place to be. Oh my
Hmm.
goodness, the sharps are on this. I have to get on it too. And when I came to Las Vegas, I lived there for 11 years, 91 to 2002. I had to learn a real hard lesson with that. Um, those line moves, generally speaking, and we're trying to educate and make you guys all smarter bettors out there. Um, Those line moves, 50% of the time, when they happen right off the opener, they're real. It's the side that the sharp syndicate groups like. 50% of the time, they're phony. And they want to push that line with the help of the public, the 20, the 50, the $100 money that comes behind them. They want to push the line to an area where they like the game. They're searching for numbers.
Hmm.
If they bet a team from 5.5 up to 6.5, and they want to bet it at plus 7.5, they'll let the public do the rest. They'll trick you into thinking it's the right side. So, an older guy, an older gentleman who advised me at the time, he said, Rob, if you play line moves in football or basketball, you'll be a 50-50 better your entire life because half of them are false, half of them are real. And for you to try and weed out what's false and what's real, it's a non win situation. So don't always fall for the line moves. Go with if you like the side that's moved, absolutely run
Hmm.
there. But don't feel like you have to play it just because they've pushed the line because they're in the business of making big money.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Saturday morning, you wake up and you see, oh my God, the line just went the other way against me 5 point. Well, they
Well, too
set you
late.
up.
Yeah, it's a lot of times it is smoke and mirrors, and I say the same with following. Where the money's at. I mean, a lot of times you do that, you're gonna almost break even. So
Right.
it's not that simple. So great point there. Let's hop on into another matchup. This is Penn State, Wisconsin. This hopefully will be an actual Big Ten solid affair because the Illinois Nebraska game was underwhelming for me. I think that's just more Nebraska, but finally we have a good matchup here. Two ranked opponents, which I'm excited for. Wisconsin favored in this one, -5.5. I think the total is at 50. Rob, are you seeing that? I want to make sure I wrote that down
Yeah, let me
correctly.
check in here real quick. I
Seems a
got
little
it.
low. I just want to make sure. I mean, it is a Big Ten game. Yeah, I'm showing 50,
Yeah,
50
50.
and a half.
Yep.
Okay, that's right. That line actually opened at 52 and a half, so we've seen a little move going down. And then looks like Wisconsin opened up around -3.5, -4. I'm not surprised that they're getting the money being the home team at Camp Randall. But let's have you start this one off. What are you looking for in this one and maybe some of your leans?
Yeah, and I like this game. But I like the underdog side, the current unpopular side, which is Penn State plus the 5.5. And I'll go back real quick to what we talked about with Virginia Tech and North Carolina. Ben, real quick. My own power ratings showed that game to be North Carolina -6, so it's right in the vicinity. I don't think you're getting value either way where the number is right now. Not that power ratings are the be all end all; they're a starting point. But in this particular game, I like the Penn State side. It's the Big Ten's not messing around, right? They throw these two up against each other right out of the chute, and
No joke.
they're two of the three best teams in that conference, for sure. Indiana probably a little, and Iowa right there as well. But you got two returning quarterbacks. Graham Mertz on one side. He forced Jack Cohn out of the program, right? Jack Cohn now quarterbacks Notre Dame. Sean Clifford forced Will Levis out of the program. He beat him out. Will Levis started a couple of games last year when Clifford wasn't playing well, but Will Levis was named the quarterback of Kentucky earlier this week. So they didn't beat out slouches. They beat out guys who got jobs at big programs,
Yeah.
SEC and Notre Dame. So you got two good guys here. I'm going to say this. One of my favorite offensive coordinators in college football is Mike Gersich. We know him from Oklahoma State. He subsequently went to Ohio State, and then he went to Texas last year, where he unleashed one of my favorite coach's quotes of all time. He had never been a game day play caller. At Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy calls his own. At Ohio State, Ryan Day called his own. And at Texas, Tom Herman gave him the job. And at that point, he said, quote, calling plays gets me off. You got to love a guy who's that interested in calling plays. And he's a good one at that. He's a good one at that. And James Franklin got a good hire. He's been losing offensive coordinators by the boatload the last 3 years. But they've got a loaded offensive group to work with. And Sean Clifford, for those that have seen him, he's a quarterback who's, he's an RPO style quarterback, much like the guy who came before him, Trace McSorley, a couple of years back. So I think that marriage works out real well. Noah Cain, their star running back, injured last year after 3 games, back on the field this year. That's huge. That running back room is about 4 deep with guys who could start anywhere in the country. And they have a receiver by the name of Jahan Dotson who tested the NFL waters and decided he would take advantage of coming back one more year. But he's an NFL first-round talent, and that receiving room is loaded. So when I look at both of these teams, Ben, they both have mirror qualities on paper. I mean, everything I just said about Penn State, I could say right back about Wisconsin. The difference was Wisconsin last year didn't score offensively the way maybe you would think they should have on paper. However, we have to give them a little bit of leeway, too. Their number 1 and number 2 receivers, Danny Davis and Kendrick Pryor, both got hurt after 2 games and never played again. So the 3, 4, 5 stepped up. Now with Davis and Pryor back, they're 5 deep at that position. So I think there's a lot of similar qualities to both of these teams. I think that both teams have a chip on their shoulder because last year was a down year for both. Right after Penn State lost that heartbreaker to Indiana in overtime, they went straight downhill, lost 4 straight. And the Wisconsin side never got on track done year. I think they scored 20 or less 4 times.
I was just looking at their scoring logs. I mean, 7, 6, 7. And then they had an overtime win against Minnesota, but they scored 20. So, yes, that's going to be a huge point of emphasis for them. They got to put up points.
They have to put up points. We expect it to improve because it's a second year for quarterback Mertz and he gets his receivers back. The other side of the coin is Penn State's defense. The numbers look bad, right? They allowed 28 points per game. But if you put it in relative terms, it was only on 329 total yards per. There's a couple of games when you go through their game logs where they outgained the opponent grossly and lost the game. And one of them was the Indiana right off the bat. So Penn State's defense probably not as bad as papers showed it to be last year. Statistics showed it to be last year. When I have 2 teams that are this close in talent, I tend to take the points. And I think the biggest concern here, if you're betting Penn State in this game, is Camp Randall. It's the biggest concern. You got to fight through that jump around and all their antics, and Wisconsin just doesn't lose at home. But I think they can go toe-to-toe. Mike Gersich makes a big difference play calling. It's a guy that Wisconsin did see when he was at Ohio State, but he wasn't calling the plays there, so I can't really take those statistics into account. Feel like this is the right. He had in those 2 games, I just want to mention real quick, he wasn't the play caller, but in those 2 games, because Ohio State played Wisconsin when he was there as the pass game coordinator, he had a hand in the play calling, Ben, but he wasn't the play caller, or he had a hand in the game planning. The 2 games they played, one regular season, his team, Ohio State, gained 431 total yards. Then they played in the Big Ten championship game a few weeks later, and you would think Wisconsin, Jim Leonard, great defensive coordinator, would be able to do better than 431 yards, but it got worse. Ohio State got 492. Ohio State was a loaded team talent-wise, but Penn State's a loaded team talent-wise, so I think there could be enough holes here to make 5.5 a good way to go. I actually do have that one already. I played it at plus 5.5, so it's one that I personally bet.
I do agree with you there. You make a convincing argument because, Penn State, I think, will be able to score. And it just comes down to Camp Randall, right? But this line's at 5.5. I mean, on a neutral setting, hypothetically, this would be closer to what, 2.5, more or less,
Yeah, they give you 3 for home
maybe
field, and
3.
most Camp Randall probably gets a little more than the
Yeah,
average 3, right?
yeah.
But you're right; it's almost a pick 'em almost in a neutral. And if it was a Penn State whiteout game, Ben, what would it
Then
be
what's
then, right?
then is it? I mean, this sounds crazy, but it could be closer to a pick 'em if it was reversed that night. I mean, it sounds wild,
Right.
but that kind of gives you some context, and I think you're catching a little value with Penn State in this spot, just from the breakdown there. I know it's sometimes not that simple, but yeah, I mean, Wisconsin, I don't know how they're just gonna snap their fingers and start scoring. I mean, they could definitely struggle in the first half. I may look at a first half under. I'm going to take a deeper look, but that was something that caught my eye. Do you have any lean on the total here? I know it's going down. It's probably going to, I might drop to 49. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, it's interesting because they're both capable through the air. But I think if you're Penn State, and again, we like to put ourselves in coordinators' shoes, X's and O's wise, at least I do. And I think if you're Penn State, first and foremost, you want to stack the box and stop Wisconsin from running because they love to pass off of the run, right? They're a play action
Yeah.
based team.
Always have been, and they always will probably stay that for years.
Yeah, I don't think it's changing under Paul Chryst anytime soon.
Yeah.
If they're successful running the football, they're going to throw the football. But if Penn State stops them initially,
It's a dogfight then.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
as you described, it's tough for Wisconsin to score if that ends up being the case. So a first half under where they're feeling each other out. I expect Penn State, knowing their offensive coordinator, to throw haymakers right off the bat. I think
Yeah.
both of these
They
teams
probably, I mean, could you expect like a hurry up, go to get this going, just kind of set the tone?
well, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because a point of emphasis during spring and summer with Gersich is he's an extreme tempo head coach, right?
Yeah.
He's not just dump tempo, he's extreme tempo. So they spent the spring conditioning for it, and they spent the spring and fall executing it. So Wisconsin, will have to face this type of tempo in this game. He likes to do it, Ben, for simple reasons. He likes to get right up to the line of scrimmage because the defense doesn't have time to see what's coming at them. He likes to limit their communication. You've played ball, so you know how important it is to communicate on either side of the football. And he needs a quarterback. He needs a quarterback that can walk to the line of scrimmage and read what they're in and go and know where the ball's going to go. And Clifford, through Mike Gersich quotes, seemingly has passed the test. That's why he's the starting quarterback here. So a great point about the tempo because I forgot to mention that, but that's going to be an emphasis here for Penn State this year.
Yeah, and Rob, you probably already know this, but to the listeners maybe who don't, in those hurry up situations, it's such a luxury for the offense because if you're spreading them out and you see the pre-snap read and the defense is kind of just in their base spot, 9 times out of 10, the quarterback already knows where he's throwing to because just from the defensive alignment, a lot of times it's the guy in the slot, depending on how the defense is playing with their linebackers. But yeah, it's like a quick 5 yards. It's literally like a run play in theory because it's a 3-step drop. But then you kind of do that a few times, then the defense starts to creep up a little bit, and then you can take those shots. So if Penn State can establish that type of tempo against a Wisconsin team that doesn't want to play like that, they want to slow the ball down. They want to control the clock. So that's going to be something to watch for. And you're making a very convincing argument for Penn State. I mean, I'm even looking at money line now, but I mean, that's getting a little greedy, but 5.5 is pretty good. 5.5 is great in a lower scoring affair. I mean, it's a 50, but in college football, 50's low in my eyes. So
Great point. In modern day college football, 50s are extremely low.
Yeah. All right, let's hop on into another one that is not a low total. This is LSU versus UCLA. This is probably my favorite game I'm looking forward to this weekend. Personally, I know we have another one coming up that we're going to discuss, but this is just one of those matchups that I think we're going to find out a lot about both these teams very quickly, and that's LSU and UCLA. UCLA, the underdog, they are the home team, showing +3. This moved from +4, and I tracked the line move pretty closely here because I wanted to see how the line moved after UCLA played, because in my eyes, that's what we should be looking at, not what it was in the summer. I mean, you can use that as a reference point, but it did move a point, right? It went from a +4 to +3, which, I mean, against a Hawaii team, I don't know how much that really should affect the line move, but it will naturally. They blew them out of the water. They're gonna see a line move point in their favor. I actually was at a wedding, sadly, Rob, so I didn't even get to watch much of that game. I watched the highlights, but I listen to guys like you and trust people what they saw and kind of use that. Sounds like DTR didn't have the best game though, really, right? I mean, let's start there, just how they looked against Hawaii, and then what you think about this line.
All right, yeah, let's go through it here real quick. I mean, because that's a main decision that you have to make here, Ben. You have to decide if that 44-10 win over Hawaii last week was absolutely real, or if a portion of it was the product of the opponent. In my mind, I can go so far as to believe both, because I do think UCLA's really, really improved. And I do believe that 44-10 was partially due to the product of the opponent. We talked about the fundamentals of the game, and it played out as it should have. But now you're playing LSU, right? And Dorian Thompson-Robinson had open receivers in that game, and they were missed. And there was a lot of commentary during that game about how he's going to need to be more accurate than he was in that game, and I concur. He just wasn't. He's often compared to Jaden Daniels of Arizona State, right? They came into Pac-12 programs at the same time, both highly touted. Jaden Daniels, I think, is the better passer at this time. But in that game, Thompson-Robinson didn't perform well, 10 of 20 for $130, and he could have had a lot more. When the running game is going that good, Ben, and you can't capitalize passing off of it, then there's something wrong there. And it really, to me, it comes into play this week. And it's the reason why I like LSU -3. You had talked about a line going toward or moving toward UCLA based on the 44-10 result, right? And I think another piece of it, listen to a lot of people this week who want to bring up the hurricane in Louisiana and use that as a handicapping angle here against LSU. And, they're going to be bothered by the hurricane. And, their minds are somewhere else. And, is it a concern? Of course, it could be a slight, but it's no reason to get off of LSU at -3 in their season opener against a Pac-12 foe when it's a team looking to make a statement. I'm going to say this from a fundamental standpoint, again, because that's usually where I start these handicaps. The cornerback tandem at LSU of Derek Stingley and Eli Ricks is arguably the best in the nation. What that allows Ed Ogeron to do and the LSU defense is it allows them to shove 8 men up in the box, leave their men isolated in man, and say, go ahead, UCLA, go ahead, Zach Charbonnet, Britton Brown, run at us the way you ran at Hawaii.
Yeah.
And if they get stuffed, Ben, I don't have any faith that Dorian Thompson-Robinson, number one, is accurate enough, and number two, that his receivers are going to get enough separation against these guys.
Yeah, they might just play man-to-man on the outside, like
Absolutely.
you said, load the box up, and try to beat us, DTR.
Tried, and it works both ways. If UCLA does root them out at the line of scrimmage and they do open holes and they do run, that's a different story.
Yeah.
But my opinion on this is that ain't going to happen against LSU, who brings back 6 of their front 7, and the seventh starter in that front 7 happens to be Mike Jones, a starting linebacker at Clemson last year, who they got through the transfer portal. That's a
nice addition to the team.
It's a pretty stout front 7, right? Other point we want to make to the viewers here real quick is Ed Ogeron fired both offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator last year. He wants to go back to the 2019 systems. He, in fact, said that if he could have conducted meetings last year when he was hiring face-to-face rather than through Zoom, he would have never hired Bo Pelini as his defensive coordinator.
Hey, there's the coach speak that we actually need there. That's why we like Coach O.
And it's absolutely true. I mean, I've never been a fan of Bo Pelini. Last year, for those who
Yeah.
remember, they played Mississippi State in the opener, the very first time Mississippi State even heard of an air raid offense. And they threw
Yeah.
for the 600-something yards against.
Yeah. LSU lost by 10 in that.
And, Orgeron said that it's because Pelini's defensive scheme and system were too complex. He said secondary members would follow a receiver and hand him off, and then he would get handed off a third time, and they just couldn't figure out their assignments. And there's
Playing
a
like
lot of busted coverage.
a zone defense or a matchup zone.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? He's yours now. He's yours now.
No, if it's cover 4, you should probably just stick with the guy. I don't think it's a good idea to pass him off when a half second can leave a guy for the risk reward. There isn't worth it. We'll put it that way.
And they found that out. I mean, that defense, we know it's loaded with 4- and 5-star talent. There's no reason for them to be as poor as they were. And I get LSU had a lot of COVID opt-outs. They really did. A lot of guys didn't choose to come back last year, but still, the backups could be starters in 80 places in America, across America. So that's what he did that way. Go ahead.
Let's talk about Miles Brennan real quick, because in my eyes, I like both these quarterbacks on either team. But for this matchup, DTR is going to be in a bad spot because he is going to be forced to really use his arm. The guy on the other side of the ball, or the other team, I should say, Miles Brennan, he was injured, I believe, in the 3rd game of the season. Is that correct? Last year?
And re-injured this spring with a broken arm.
Yeah. So he's going to be ready to go. I personally haven't seen enough of this guy to say he's going to be great, but I also think he's talented enough that he has a high upside. But what are your thoughts on him? It sounds like if you do like LSU in this spot, you do have a little faith in him.
Well, yeah, and he probably, from the last thing I read on his recent injury, it could be season ending. It could be 5 weeks. And Brad Johnson, we all remember as an NFL quarterback. Max Johnson played a lot in place of Brennan last year, and he's going to be your starter for this game. They're kind of
okay. See, that's right. I got it confused. So Johnson is the starter for this one.
Johnson's the starter, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
And if you like horse racing, it's kind of like a 1 and 1A entry. They're kind of the same thing. And Max Johnson has a pretty big body of work to go on here. Benny threw 150 passes last year, completed 59%, 8 TDs, 1 INT. A host of wide receivers here, great stable of running backs, solid offensive line. I think he's going to be fine. What they did offensively, they fired the offensive coordinator, and Ed Orgeron brought back the Joe Brady system that Joe Burrow ran a couple of years back. To do that, his offensive coordinator hire was a guy named Jake Peets, who was the quarterback coach for the Panthers last year and worked underneath Brady. So he knows Brady's system, brought it back to Baton Rouge. I'm not saying it's going to be record-setting, historic, like Joe Burrow's was. That was probably a once-in-a-lifetime deal. But it's going to be good and better. Everything is simplified here. Back to basics with LSU, where they can just say, hey, we'll roll out our talent and do our thing, and you roll out yours, and we'll see who's better. I think from a long-term projection, they're going to make a move up the SEC West ladder this year. I know there's been a lot of chatter about A&M, but I wouldn't sell LSU short. I think 3 is just way too low in this game, Ben, when I look at it fundamentally. So I'm on LSU, if you can't tell already.
Yeah, Rob, this could be one of those games, and we always see these week 1 games, and in retrospect, we look back, of course, but this could be one of those games where we look in 5-6 weeks and we're like, wow, LSU is the underdog. Or sorry, LSU was only getting 3 versus, maybe they should have been 10-point favorites, right?
Right.
This could be one of those spots. And one last thing I wanted to point out with this game is the attendance that UCLA had against Hawaii. Now, I know it's Hawaii. I mean, I don't know how many people are going to drive an hour to watch Hawaii play UCLA. But the point I'm making here is I don't know how much of a home field advantage UCLA is going to have in this matchup. I mean, Los Angeles isn't really a college football town. I think most people know that. But I also would expect a lot of LSU fans in this one, too. I wouldn't be shocked if this is like a 60-40 type of split from the fan perspective. I don't know how much that actually is fixing into this line or anything along those lines, but it is a point I wanted to make because that was something that I did hear a little bit about Hawaii. So I'm trying to think ahead to this matchup. Don't want to get too caught up on that, but I just wanted to point that out before we moved on to the next game.
Yeah, and let's give one more concern you would have, because we talked about this bit last week, Ben, so I'll bring it back up. We talked about the hurricane. People use as an argument for UCLA. You talked about the final score last week, one game under their belt, use that as an argument pro UCLA. And did Chip Kelly play vanilla and not show everything last week? Remember, we were talking about look-ahead games last week, and was this one in particular, going to be a look-ahead game? Again, I'm not buying that because I think UCLA showed what they do. What they do is they want to run the football. Chip Kelly's always been a run-oriented spread guy with a mobile quarterback, and I just think LSU has the way they match up, and that's why these games are all different. Everybody doesn't have the cornerback tandem that LSU has, so UCLA is going to shred some people, but this team is a tough matchup for UCLA's offense, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, and I guess we should touch on the total here. Let's see, it's dropping down. Let's see here. Opened around 70, down to 65. I think the line's moving in the right direction in my eyes. I think 70 was too much, and I think people saw maybe this is a move on DTR in saying like he isn't ready to throw for 300 yards, and he's probably not going to do that against this LSU team. So I would honestly lean under still at this number, even at 65. Probably not going to play it at that number, but I wonder if that's going to go even lower. What do you think? Think it's going to even move 64, or you think it's kind of stale in a little bit at 65?
It's possible. We talked earlier that 65 is a key.
It is,
but it's still, if you think that, like I do, that LSU can prevent UCLA from just running rampant. They got 44 last week. Can they get 24 this week against LSU? If they do, LSU has to get to 41 to push that total. It's possible. It's possible, but I can see why people played under 70. I think maybe the value has been taken, and now you have to have a really, really strong opinion one way or the other to play it at this point.
Yeah, because like a 35-24 type game seems reasonable.
Yep.
Like LSU scoring 40, I don't know. We'll see. That's an issue. Yeah, when you put it that way and you look at the implied totals for each team, it makes sense. So I think 65 is probably where it should be at this point. So, all right, let's move on to probably the top game of the weekend. We have Clemson and Georgia. This is a fun one. Two really good quarterbacks. I think Georgia has a few injuries to their offense, some tight ends, but I'm showing Georgia. Let's see here. Do I have the correct that they're favored by 3? And this is a neutral site game, correct? This is in Charlotte.
This is.
Yeah.
In fact,
so
there's
neutral
one
site.
tonight.
I'm sorry, Clemson favored by 3. I was like, wait a second. Clemson favored by 3. This is in Charlotte, North Carolina. I think this is at the stadium where the Panthers play. Is that correct?
Yeah, Bank of America.
Okay. Bank of America. Showing the total at 50. Total open around 51.5. I know this is one you definitely wanted to touch on, so I'll let you start. What are your leans, and if you have any official plays in this one?
Well, I disagree with the movement on the total downward. I think it started 52, Ben. I'd have to go back and check the line.
That's what I had, 51.5, 52, around there.
And now we're coming down, and Clemson's defense is going to be one of the nation's best. There's no question. And Georgia's talent level is one of the nation's best. I get all of that. But I think we've seen, and I'll get to it in a minute, that a lot of times these high-powered offenses override really good defenses. But I want to start with your point about Georgia injuries, because I had to look into that this week. It's been
and I had that correct, right? Two tight ends, right?
Yeah, they had him at wide receiver, at tight end. They were kind of cluster injuries, and they were certainly concerns. And as of yesterday, they're going to be weakened somewhat, but not to the extent that I thought. And I don't think it'll make that big of a difference. I mean, the wide receiver injuries are probably a little more costly than the tight end injuries are, because a couple of those guys are going to play now. So I didn't put a ton of stock into that. It's funny when you read the local beat writers from Clemson and the local beat writers from Georgia, boy, you get a ton of positive as far as national title is
Yeah.
concerned. Georgia really believes they're there, and Kirby Smart's done a tremendous job recruiting. There's no question. You have an air raid system now. They found their quarterback. JT Daniels was, the guy all along. They just took too long to figure it out
Hmm.
with JT Daniels. He was
I mean,
injured
he's
for a
he's
while.
projected to go top 10 in the draft at this
Yeah,
point in time. So
and when they brought Todd Monken in as offensive coordinator to run the air raid, of the candidates that they had at quarterback, JT Daniels was the only guy. He had played air raid under Graham Harrell in the first year of installation at UCLA or USC, excuse me, before he transferred from USC to Georgia. So you had an air raid quarterback already. He was hurt a little bit, and they took it slow with him. But now they found him. His numbers last year were incredible. I won't go through them. Their running back room is second to none
mhm.
in the country. Their wide receiving core, despite the losses, I mean, George Pickens is a big loss, notable name there, but they're as any of these elite programs, Alabama, Ohio State, on down the line, they're loaded. Clemson, to me though, when Justin Ross, their wide receiver a couple years back, second leading wide receiver, when he was cleared in August to play full time, boy, that's a difference maker. Clemson on the outside now is as explosive as anybody in the country. Quarterback here, of course, everybody, Trevor Lawrence is gone. DJ
Say his name.
Uyunglele is how they
I
pronounce
was
that.
I was practicing
Yeah,
because I was like, I can't mess that up. And then I was like, a lot of people have been saying DJU, so
yeah, I
props
had
to
to
you.
spell it out with three O's, three
Yeah,
E's, Ungalele.
yeah.
But when we saw DJ play as a starter, over 400 yards passing against Notre Dame, and people will downplay Notre Dame, but again, and Notre Dame's
I was
not
on the
Wake
wrong side of that
Forest.
one.
Yeah, it's
I
not
thought
Wake Forest.
I put the money. I thought Notre Dame was going to cover. I was wrong.
He did a hell of a job that day, and I think they're just fine.
Yeah.
Travis Etienne is going at running back, but again, the running back room, this kid Will Shipley, freshman running back, who the fans want to see as the starter because he's so highly touted coming in. But again, they're about three deep there. Both offenses are lights out here, Ben, and I know that the defenses are good, but we're talking about 50. You and I just mentioned about 15 minutes ago that 50 in college football is low. If you get 27-24 in this game, you win. You're over
Yeah.
bet.
50's got to be, I would have to do the numbers, but I think 51 is probably average at this point. 50 is probably below. I mean, it's got to be around there. If you go through the lines this week, I mean, there's only like 6 or 7 that are under 45. So,
And I think team philosophies play. Like if you have an Iowa game under 50, I can understand Iowa's very methodical on offense, extremely strong on defense. I think 22 games in a row now where they've allowed 24 or less. But you have two rapid tempo teams here. You have an air raid on one side, and you have Clemson on the other side. Both teams that want to rattle off 80 plays a game and wear out the defense.
yeah.
And so on a night in Charlotte, where the weather probably will be pretty good, I don't think humidity will affect fatigue too
In
much
both
this
teams,
weekend.
they're probably more acclimated to that
Right.
sort of weather. So,
They come from that territory.
yeah.
But the pace is going to be, when you play over, you want total plays to be high. You want to have as many opportunities as you
Yeah.
can get for one of those plays to break. And when you have game breakers, like they have in this contest, I really don't understand why people have driven it under a key number of 51. I'll harp on that again because I'll rattle off final scores 31-20, 27-24. These are numbers that
All
happen,
overs.
right?
When you break it
34-17.
down, it's really good to break it down that way. And we're not trying to predict what the score is going to be. But when you put it that way, you're like, well, 31-24 seems pretty reasonable. So maybe I don't like the under as much.
Yeah.
Oh,
And key numbers, just like when you're betting sides, key numbers and totals are huge. So I just think it plays over 50 points here. I just think the offense is at some point. But one more thing I'll say real quick. The last 7 times Clemson has played either an SEC team or a elite brand name. Notre Dame is the example here. They're one of these 7 games. In 6 of those 7, 6 of those 7 all went over 51 points. So you think of the times they played Alabama in the national championship and how great those defenses were on both sides, and they still went flying over this number of
Yeah.
51. I think the same happens here.
And I'm spacing his name. Their coordinator, offensive coordinator, pretty solid guy too. I mean, they find ways to get points on the board one way or another. Like you said, when they're playing those elite defenses. I mean, even Notre Dame had a pretty good defense that year,
Right.
last year, and yeah, still a lot of points. And I was so wrong on that game. I hate to go back to it, but I remember I was like, I like Notre Dame and I like the under, and I was wrong on both. So yeah, that's a great stat and something to watch for. And then as far as the side, maybe I missed it. Are you leaning Clemson?
I'm undecided. I think if I were forced to, somebody said you have to make a play on this game.
I am forcing you, Rob.
Yeah, I would probably lean Clemson.
Yeah.
But I'm, more infatuated with the total here, Ben. I think over 50 just to me doesn't make a lot of sense. And again, you could be wrong. It's why bookmakers are there to take two-sided action. They'll gladly welcome my bet with the guy who's coming with under 50. But I think 51 is a reasonable expectation in this game.
And I will say the bookmakers in the early weeks, they're probably going to be wronger than they ever will. I'll say that. Maybe that's a hot take, but I just think the research that guys like us can do in these early spots, I think is invaluable. And I think it goes a long way because, they're basing a lot of stuff on speculation in last year, but, so are we to an extent. But I think there's opportunities where we can find some pretty good value in lines. So one last thing I wanted to cover, just a few viewer questions. We have App State versus East Carolina, or we could discuss Boise State, UCF. Do you have anything on App State, East Carolina? Because I personally don't have a lot on that one unless you do.
All right, so let me say this because I am somebody who played East Carolina in this
perfect.
game. The number came way down, Ben. This thing started 13.5
Yeah,
in the summer, all the way down to 9. 9.5, 10 now today, 9.5, mostly 10s. I still think 10 is worth taking. I don't know, and I'm going to be real brief with this because I have a boatload of notes for another show I'm going to do, but I'm going to be quick here and just go to the main point on this one. I don't think the separation of talent is as great as maybe is publicly perceived. App State is a team on the rise and on just about everybody's network at this point in time because of what they've done the last 5 years.
Ever since they beat Michigan. I mean,
yeah, right.
People know that. I mean, it sounds funny that I'm bringing that up, but it's completely changed how people look at this team. Even though that's been like 10, 15 years ago, but
yeah, it's probably closer to 15 now that you say it. Yeah.
And I'm sure it's changed the recruit. Like, it's funny what that one game did to that program. I mean, it's wild. So continue.
And they've gotten their coaches the last 5 years better jobs, right? Scott Satterfield moved on to Louisville, and then Eli Drinkwitz moved on to Missouri. So this program's been red hot in the Sun Belt, and they've progressively got better. So I think the perception here is East Carolina stinks. Appalachian State is on the rise, and they make that number. I'm just going to bring this up real quick. Last year, and again, COVID year, I get it. But each one of these two teams last year played 5 teams that went to bowl games. In the case of ECU, they went 0-2 against Central Florida and Cincinnati against the spread. They got destroyed by both UCF and Cincinnati, both extremely highly ranked programs. Cincinnati took Georgia to the wire in a bowl game. And then the other 3 games they played against bowl teams, Tulsa, Tulane, and SMU, pretty good teams. They went 2-1 against the spread, so 2-3 overall against a pretty good quality of opponent.
Mm-hmm.
The other side, Appalachian State, they played 5 teams that went to bowl games, but they were 0-5 against the spread. They didn't cover against any of them. The 5 they played, Marshall, they lost by double digits. Double-digit loss to Coastal Carolina.
Yep.
So the 2 best teams they played, they got stomped on. They laid 18 against Georgia State, only won by 4. They had an outright loss to Louisiana Lafayette. And they had a non-cover against Georgia Southern, laid 9.5, only won by 8. So 0-5. Again, in this business, we play against numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And that number right there shows you how overvalued Appalachian State is, how the opinion, how the power rating is too high. East Carolina, for other reasons, fundamentally, Ben, they're bigger, more physical. Third year of Mike Houston's program. You just expect them to be better here. It's a neutral site game. This one's in Charlotte as well. So I think
Is that the same stadium?
which means it might be torn up a little bit
Yeah,
Saturday
because
night
this
when the
would
other
be.
two teams play on it.
Would this be at? Let me think here. What day is this on? This is on Friday.
Thursday, tonight.
This is Thursday. Okay.
And then Saturday, they'll come back and play on the same field in the other Bank of America Stadium game. This one is an Appalachian State home game by definition. It was moved to Charlotte to get a bigger crowd. 31,000 tickets sold to this point. Appalachian State has a big following in Charlotte, and they have their record for attendance there, putting people in this Bank of America Stadium is 19,000. East Carolina also has a monster following in that particular area. So the home field advantage that should have been at App State is kind of diluted because you're going to, I think you might have a lot of purple, as much purple as you do black and gold in this,
Most
in
likely.
the stands here.
Yeah. Or it's not going to be anything over 60-40.
Right,
Yeah.
in favor of App State maybe. So at this, just thought 10 was too many for a program that's on the rise, East Carolina, and for two programs that I don't think on paper, talent-wise, are separated by that much. East Carolina brings back an enormous amount of lettermen. Forget about starters. 63 lettermen who have played 3 years under Mike Houston now. So,
Yeah.
the head coach tells you we're bigger, deeper, physical, faster. I'll buy into it.
Is this one of those spots, do you think the Sharp Syndicate groups pounded?
They got it right away, Ben.
You think so? Yeah,
They got it right away.
Getting this at 13.5. At least that's what I'm showing. But even anything under or over 10, that seems pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't get that lucky on that end of the stick. By the time I got there, it was only 11. But still, I had my fingers crossed over the summer that people wouldn't recognize ECU. I kind of have them on a short list of teams that, we're always looking for cellar dwellers that we think are going to improve because those are the teams nobody wants to bet when they go to the window.
Yeah, no one's really running to the window, so to speak, on an East Carolina like that. But
exactly.
It's fine.
So we'll play them tonight.
Yeah, that's fine with me. So that's a good one. Yeah, I forgot that is tonight. So that's going to be a good
4-year
one to
starter
watch.
at quarterback. Holton Ayers,
Nice.
4 years.
Yeah, and East Carolina, was it 2 years ago? Had a pretty good team, record wise. Let me see here. I actually have the notes right here. No, actually, it's been a while. I take that back.
Yeah, Mike.
But they had that season though. I guess maybe it's been like 5 years ago where defense was really good, but they did get some good recruits out of that season. So, I like the thinking there. I think it makes a lot of sense and great point on the neutral site. And I think especially in these early week 1 games, you have to make sure before you bet a game, know where it's being played. Because to be honest, I spaced that myself. I didn't know that was, I for some reason thought that was in Boone. So thank you for bringing that up. And there's probably 20 or so games this weekend that are going to be at neutral site games or site locations too as well. So just want to reiterate that point. Make sure to do your research, know where the game is being played before you place a bet. So I know you have some other obligations to do the rest of the day. Before you leave, though, let everyone know where they can find you and maybe what else you have going on the rest of the day, and they can continue to listen to you if they're not sick of you already, because people are probably already sick of me. So,
thanks for the opportunity, Ben. You can find all my work at wagertalk.com. Wagertalk.com. I would encourage anybody watching this. It's a free sign up. All you do is plug in your email address, and you get immediate access to all the media content that we do each and every day, Monday through Friday. As Ben mentioned, come 12 noon here on the East Coast, 10 a.m., 17 minutes from now where you are, Ben, I'll be on Wager Talk's noontime show, Wager Talk Today, discussing more college football. After that, I'll be on with a good buddy of ours, Hakeem Prophet, Ski Prophet. He's got a show on Spotify's Green Room. We'll be there for an hour discussing college football as well. But the point here, wagertalk.com, you can't go wrong, guys. Just plug it in your email address and getting all the free info. If you are interested in subscribing to selection packages. My work is all there as well. You can check out my homepage at wagertalk.com, see what I have up for sale. If you want to invest in it, absolutely you can. So once again, it's wagertalk.com. And if you want to find me on Twitter, that's real simple. It's at Rob Vino Sports.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think subscription packages make a lot of sense. If you know you're going into the season and you're going to be betting consistently throughout the weeks on end, it is definitely worthwhile to look into. It is. It's a long season, and you don't need to blow your bankroll week one. Always remember that, because it's a long season. We see that every year, Rob. I'm down 5 units, and I'm like, well, I can help you move forward, but I'm not going to specifically try to get you out of a hole. So, and for anyone who's from Rob's audience, you can follow me at Ben Carey on Twitter, and then my company Capwise. We focus on data analytics and simulation models. So right now, actually, Rob, you might not even know this. We decided for the first few weeks of college football, we're not going to do any sort of modeling. College football is a very unique sport. It's really hard to model because of all the moving new pieces.
Right.
So, and I've done just fine handicapping them myself. So we're going to continue to do it that way. But NFL, we will have some extensive modeling in place, which I'm excited for. NFL is a beast. It's a completely different type of sport to handicap than college football, even though they're both football. You know that. Two completely different outlooks you have to have. So follow Capwise on Twitter, and yeah, you can find all my work there. So I'll let you go, Rob. I know you have the call coming up in 15 minutes. I'll probably hop in. So I really appreciate you hopping on.
Thanks for having me, Ben, and I'll get with you next week. We'll do it again.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll come back with some positive notes. I'll have 5 or 6 games in play, so I'm hoping for a good start. I traditionally do pretty well week one, but knock on wood, you never know. It's college football. We're not out there playing; it's players playing. So hopefully we did our research.
Yeah. No, as a person taught me long ago, this sports betting, it's the definition is putting yourself in the best position to win. You don't always win, but you want to do your work and put yourself in the best position.
Absolutely.
Over the course of time, you'll be a winner if you do that and you don't shortcut it. To all your viewers, Ben, I hope everybody has a big weekend. Hopefully we provided a few tidbits here that help you cash a couple of tickets along the way.
For sure. All righty, Rob. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you so much.
All right, buddy. Take care.
All right. See ya.